Welcome. Today we're tackling a distinction that's really vital, but often gets muddy in everyday talk. The difference between cynicism and skepticism. And for those of you in leadership roles, or aiming for them, getting this right isn't just academic, it's actually pretty strategic. It hits decision-making, risk, innovation, the works.
Exactly. Our goal here is to show why one of these mindsets, skepticism, really offers a significant strategic edge, especially when things get complex or the stakes are high. We're going to demonstrate how embracing, genuine skepticism rather than falling into cynicism leads to better decisions, helps manage risks, and frankly, unlocks more potential for success. We'll use some practical frameworks, first, second, and third order thinking, with real examples to show the tangible benefits. Think of it less as theory and more as a toolkit for building a really resilient and effective mindset.
Okay, let's unpack that foundational difference then, because you're right, people often swap these terms, but our sources are clear, there's a sharp line. Let's start with cynicism. What is it, fundamentally, and what are its drawbacks from a strategic viewpoint?
Well, cynicism, as the material defines it, is basically a negative stance, almost passive, really. It comes with this default assumption of uh, bad intentions or self-interest or that things are bound to fail. It's that sort of gloomy one-size-fits-all answer you hear, oh, it's all a scam, or people are just out for themselves, or that constant feeling that something will probably end in disappointment, maybe even, a total mess. Our sources kind of paint it as deciding you hate all movies just because you saw one really terrible one.
So it's like taking a losing bet on humanity from the start. Low expectations and critically no room for discovery or real engagement. It sounds almost self-defeating.
Absolutely. It's a very constrained way of thinking. It doesn't offer any real challenge, no discovery, just that grim sort of satisfaction when things do go wrong. Like, see, I told you. It's described as the mental posture of, well, a grumpy cat, just watching the world fail to meet its already low expectations and the strategic cost. It's huge. Cynicism shuts down opportunities. It stops creative thinking, collaboration, problem solving. Because why bother if you've already decided it won't work?
That really clarifies the strategic dead end cynicism represents. So how does skepticism stand apart? Why is it framed as a strategic upgrade for professionals, particularly leaders?
Skepticism is totally different. It's active, it's engaged, it's not about dismissing things out of hand, it's about investigating them proactively. Instead of the grumpy cat, the skeptic is more like that curious detective, maybe with a cool hat and a magnifying glass, as one source put it. You're not saying no, you're asking, okay, show me the evidence. It means demanding proof, questioning assumptions, verifying before you commit to a conclusion.
And that rigor, that active checking, that's where the benefits come in. You don't just predict failure.
Yeah.
You actually understand why something might fail
Hmm.
or succeed. It's moving from just watching to actually analyzing.
Precisely. The skeptic gets to enjoy things or seize opportunities because they've done the work, they've checked it out. The cynic who thinks all the metaphorical pies are poison, well, they just starve, paralyzed by distrust. But the skeptic asks questions. Who made this pie? What's in it? Anyone else tried it? Are they okay? It's reasonable inquiry. Verification. And that lets the skeptic make an informed choice and, importantly, confidently enjoy the delicious, non-poisoned pie. This applies everywhere, assessing a market, vetting tech, even just picking a useful gadget. You operate from a verified reality. That builds confidence.
That distinction is crystal clear now, and it really sets the stage for applying this skeptical mindset, especially using those structured thinking frameworks you mentioned.
Hmm.
Let's start with first principles thinking. Many in our audience know the term, but how can we frame it to highlight its strategic power beyond just the basic definition?
Right. First principles thinking, fundamentally, is about drilling down past assumptions. It's about deconstructing complex problems or opportunities to their absolute basic truths, irreducible elements. You build understanding from the ground up instead of just accepting how things are or how they've always been done. The core idea: identify the key variables, challenge every assumption, especially the hidden ones, and simplify until you hit bedrock reality. Its strategic power comes from uncovering possibilities or constraints that are invisible if you just stick to conventional thinking. The real challenge for leaders is often overcoming that inertia, the "we've always done it this way" mindset, or seeing assumptions that are so deeply baked in you don't even realize they're assumptions. It's not just simplifying complexity, it's often dismantling perceived complexity.
Dismantling perceived complexity. I like that. Can you give an example? Maybe one that shows how it finds an unexpected advantage, not just avoiding a pitfall.
Sure. Let's touch on that guaranteed crypto llama scheme mentioned in the sources first. A cynic just waves it off scam. End of story. A skeptic, using first principles, asks for the white paper. They want an independent audit of the, quote, llama back-end infrastructure. They want the yield farming mechanics explained. This rigor lets the skeptic not just predict failure, but explain why it failed. Maybe the fleece-to-coin ratio was fundamentally broken, or the algorithmic shearing couldn't scale. That improves decision-making, reduces risk dramatically. But for your point about advantage, imagine a mature manufacturing firm. Their profits on an old product are shrinking. The usual approach, maybe trim costs here and there, small tweaks. A cynic says, market's dying, nothing to do. A skeptic using first principles strips it right back. What's the absolute core need this product meets? What are the fundamental material inputs for getting current suppliers? What's the irreducible function of each step on the line? Maybe a patent production step everyone thought was essential adds zero fundamental value. Or a substitute material dismissed before is actually functionally identical but way cheaper if sourced differently. That's not just avoiding a scam, it's potentially reinventing the whole cost structure, maybe even the product itself. Finding a competitive edge hidden by the old way of thinking.
That kind of clarity, the potential for reinvention, naturally leads into second-order thinking. What does this layer add? Why is it so vital for strategic foresight?
Second-order thinking builds right on those first principle insights. It pushes us beyond the immediate direct result. It forces us to think about the consequences of the consequences, the ripple effects. It's not just asking what happens next, but, okay, and after that, what happens and what does that imply? It helps you map out different scenarios, weigh up the full range of risks and rewards, and make decisions that are more holistic, decisions that account for those downstream effects.
And the poison pie scenario fits here too, doesn't it? It goes beyond just, is it poisoned, to the wider implications.
Exactly. The cynic is stuck. All pies might be poison. The skeptic, having maybe used first principles to check the baker, now uses second-order thinking. Okay, if I eat this, what are the immediate effects? Any potential side effects? Long-term health implications? What if it's fine for me but bad for my colleague? What's the reputation risk if this pie goes wrong at a client meeting? It's this multi-layered inquiry that leads to a truly informed decision. Maybe the pie is fine, or maybe the risk assessment suggests choosing something else. In business, think about launching a product. Does it grab quick market share but trigger regulatory issues later? Second-order thinking helps you foresee that, maybe guiding you to a more sustainable launch strategy. It's about avoiding those nasty, unintended consequences.
Which brings us finally to third-order thinking. This is described as the highest level, needing real strategic vision. What does it involve? How does it integrate the other two?
Third-order thinking zooms out even further. It demands you consider the broadest context, the long-term systemic implications. You have to ask, how does this decision fit into the bigger picture? What are the strategic ripples for our organization, our industry, maybe even society or the geopolitical scene? It helps individuals and whole organizations make decisions that aren't just tactically sound, but align with a long-term vision and core purpose. It takes the fundamental truths from first principles, maps the immediate and secondary effects using second-order thinking, and then places all of that within the grand strategic narrative.
The alien negotiation example, while a bit fanciful, really illustrates this on a grand scale, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. In that hypothetical, ultra-high-stakes negotiation, the cynic defaults to conflict. They're obviously hostile. Attack. No engagement. The skeptic, using third-order thinking, takes a different approach. Welcome. Interesting ship. Before we discuss treaties, could you provide some verifiable, repeatable evidence that your FTL drive isn't, say, a very sophisticated planetary projection? Also, what are the long-term systemic effects on resource markets if we integrate our economies?
It's about asking deep systemic questions rooted in intellectual rigor. In the example, this comprehensive strategic view earns respect, leading to dialogue, the invitation to the mothership instead of conflict. It's about using intellectual depth to foster collaboration, maybe find totally unexpected solutions, or forge alliances that give you a unique competitive edge. It reframes the whole interaction from suspicion to strategic possibility.
So these three frameworks together, first, second, third order thinking, they're really the engine of strategic skepticism. How do they help someone rigorously sort fact from fiction, especially today with so much information and misinformation flying around? Well, our sources define fact pretty clearly. Information based on objective, verifiable evidence, empirical reality, things you can test or consistently observe. Fiction, on the other hand, comes from imagination. It might aim for emotional truth or serve a narrative, but it's not grounded in that objective reality. Now, a cynic often just lumps it all together in their negative narrative. They don't really engage enough to distinguish verifiable data from invented stuff because, well, it's all probably bad anyway, right?
Whereas the skeptic uses these thinking tools to dissect it.
Precisely. First principles helps validate the foundation. Is this claim built on solid ground or just layers of assumptions and stories? It strips away the narrative to find the core data, if any. Second order thinking tests the implications. If this fact is true, what should logically follow? Do those consequences match up with other things we know are true? If not, that's a red flag, might be fiction, or at least incomplete information. And third order thinking places verified facts in the bigger strategic picture. Does this fact, plus its likely consequences, make sense within the broader system we understand? Does it fit the pattern? This whole multi-layered process acts as a powerful filter against being misled, whether it's deliberate disinformation or just, honest mistakes.
That leads into something else mentioned, the challenge of sincerity. That sounds complex. What does it mean for developing a truly skeptical mindset, especially if you're leading others?
It is complex. The challenge of sincerity points to how difficult self-deception can be. What someone says they believe, or even what they think they believe consciously, might not actually be what's driving their behavior or their deeper motivations. So, an effective skeptic has to understand that information needs scrutiny, even if the source seems totally sincere. And this is critical that it includes yourself. You have to evaluate stated intentions against actual behavior, against patterns, against those deeper, maybe unconscious drives. It reinforces the need for objective assessment, not just taking things, or people, or yourself, at face value, because, as the sources say, the self is not simple. For a leader, this means constantly checking your own biases, your own assumptions, your emotional reactions. Are you making this decision based on objective analysis, or is some hidden internal narrative pulling the strings? That's a tough but necessary level of self-skepticism.
Okay, with all this deep thinking, first, second, third order, checking sincerity, it feels like you could easily get bogged down. Analysis paralysis seems like a real risk. How do we avoid that? How do we keep moving forward?
That's a very real danger and a practical concern. The sources offer good advice here. First, set clear goals. What, specifically, are you trying to achieve with this analysis or decision? Having a target focuses the effort. Second, prioritize. Look, not every single issue needs a full third-order workup. Focus your deep thinking on the critical points, the high-leverage decisions, the things with the biggest potential impact. Don't sweat the small stuff with the same intensity. And third, maybe the most crucial, eventually you have to make a decision. You gather information, you analyze using these frameworks, you reduce uncertainty as much as feasible, and then you act. The aim isn't zero uncertainty, that's usually impossible. It's reducing it to an acceptable level to make an informed choice. Make the call, implement, and then be ready to learn and adjust. That keeps the momentum going. Analysis serves action, it doesn't replace it.
It definitely seems clear that skepticism, approached this way, offers a much more robust and adaptive path, especially in complex situations. So pulling it all together, what are the tangible benefits for you, the listener, in adopting this kind of mindset?
Well, this disciplined, skeptical approach using these thinking tools, it actually cultivates genuine joy and curiosity. There's a sense of relief, too, that comes from knowing you're operating based on verified reality, not just assumptions or fears. It shifts you from being reactive and maybe guarded to being active, engaged. It's ultimately a more rewarding way to lead and, frankly, to live. Our material is quite explicit. It suggests this leads to a more robust personality, stronger professional networks, because they're built on competence and trust and the ability to actually pioneer new solutions, access those unconventional insights cynics just dismiss. It's about building success on a solid foundation of truth.
So ultimately, the choice seems pretty stark. Do you stay on the sidelines watching things potentially unfold negatively, just muttering, "I knew it," with a kind of detached resignation?
Or do you get onto the field? Do you actively engage? Rigorously check the data, challenge the assumptions with first principles, map out the future with second-order foresight, position yourself strategically using third-order vision, and ultimately achieve success that's verifiable and sustainable. The strategic advantage of skepticism, powered by this kind of multi-order thinking, isn't just nice to have. In today's world complex, fast-moving, it's really paramount. It fosters resilience, drives innovation, and underpins long-term success, both professionally and personally.
Which leaves you with a question to think about. Where, in your current work, or maybe even your personal life, could applying this skeptical, multi-order thinking approach right now uncover an assumption you haven't examined? An assumption that, once questioned, could lead to a truly transformative decision? What might you discover? What advantage could you unlock if you started asking why, just one or two levels deeper?